Hello, let's work on an open source project. We'll work on the Western Friend website today. Source code is available at github.com/westernfriend under the westernfriend.org repository. We have a feature request here, or it's kind of a bug. It's an inconsistency in the user interface. On our search results page, we're listing many different content types. Some of them are articles, some of them are a person's biography, upcoming events, and we'd like for the search results to be consistent first thing is, currently we display the content type for some of the content, but others we're not mentioning what type it is. So here's an example where we have articles that just display normally, news items that have headers, events, and I'm thinking how to approach this. Maybe a good approach would just be to apply the styling from the article search display, where it's just kind of generic. We don't maybe need to say this is a news item. The idea there was that a person might be searching for a particular type of content, but in hindsight, perhaps those types of content are more for the editor when organizing the website content, and not so much for the end user. They're not necessarily thinking in taxonomy of Western Friend content types. They're just interested in Quaker camp or something like that, Quaker ecology. So what I want to do is I want to get I'm going to work with and try this out. This is an experimental session. We're going to use a new feature on GitHub called Copilot Workspace. And it's going to take this description, this issue, and it's going to try to create an action plan for us. And maybe resolve the issue. It's going to try to write some code. Now, this is the first time I've really worked with this feature in a meaningful way. I've done a couple of dry runs with it, just trying to see how it works. I created a new project and a couple of features. I was working with Flutter, and it wasn't ideally suited for the GitHub Workspace because Flutter, you need to build and run it usually locally in a device simulator or desktop app. So for the Flutter development use case, I would need to be working on a Flutter app, like a web app, in other words. That's what I mean by that, so that it can run in this GitHub Workspace, which it runs in your browser basically. And this project, Western Friend, is Django based, so it runs essentially. It's a server, and then I can access it in the browser. So this seems more ideally suited. So what we're going to do is improve on this issue description using ChatGPT. This is just the way I'm thinking to approach this. going to create a new chat. And I'm going to just prompt GPT just like I did just a moment ago, describing the current setup and the desired outcome. I'm going to paste this in. We have a open source project on GitHub. The project is built with Django, the Wagtail CMS, and hence the Python language. The project has a search page which allows a user to input a text query and will retrieve results from the website content. The content consists of several types of Wagtail page models mostly, but also perhaps some Django models are mixed in there as well. Each content type, defined as a database model, has a corresponding search template that displays the output of that search result in the list view. So it's a small HTML snippet designed to handle the specific structure of that content type while integrating it into a stream of search results or a list of search results of varying content types. Each of those search templates has small differences in formatting and inconsistencies in how it is labeled. Some of the search templates display the content type in parentheses. For example, the events are listed as event title and then in parentheses event. News items are listed as news item title and then in parentheses news item. And the headings, the HTML structure, the markup is different. We have a search template for magazine articles that uses the correct formatting. It's using bootstrap card body with a card title link around the article title, and then a brief teaser text coming from one of the fields in the article. And I'd like to follow that format for the remainder of the content types. So just using the structure of the article card, but applying that to news items, topics, events, and the other content types, letters, where we've introduced these inconsistencies. I'll paste in the issue description below as it was opened by our user, as it was reported by our primary user. I'd like to create a comprehensive GitHub issue description based on this that will be used to prompt a large language model to assist me with the coding task. So it needs to include salient details on the issue as well as the desired outcome and potentially cues to where to look in the code. And this large language model is trained on our code and will look for the correct files to edit and make modifications. So hence this GitHub issue description is very important. And it's pretty close. And this is one thing that's kind of annoying, just in general in web development, is these headers are hierarchical. And so if I'm going to have a H5, I need to have an H4 on that page. The likelihood of that happening isn't very high, and what's happening is that people in general are using these to control the style, the size of the text, and they're just selecting a header based on how big they want the text to appear, and not necessarily the content hierarchy. And we know this is an anti-pattern. Developers have known this for a long time, web developers. But the large language models have also been in turn trained on these data, and so now they're producing a similar output. So in the context of this issue, this would at least be an H2, but if you look at our search results, the H2s, I can see why people are avoiding the H2 because they're so big. This is an H2 card title. So this is why Bootstrap allows us to decouple the title semantically from the aesthetic. And what we will do is use the proper Bootstrap semantics there. So let's tell GPT about that. Semantically, these should be header level 2 elements, but visually they can perhaps be header level 5 as exemplified above. Let's update just the snippet. We don't have to change anything else about the task to use the proper semantic H2 element, but then Bootstrap's class to change the visual appearance of the header text to be smaller in size, such as H4 or H5. Let's see if it just produces this snippet. Okay, it's going to give me the whole issue back, but okay, that's fine. So yeah, this is pretty comprehensive, and the cool thing is these descriptions, they're useful for people as well. Although some of the hallucinations, like it doesn't exactly know the files to edit, and I'm hoping that the GPT, the Copilot Workspace, will actually figure that out. But here we can see. Yeah, and you say something like Bootstrap and people will tune out. It's kind of weird how conditioned we are to think that something that's been around for a while and been under continual development and has reached maturity, widespread adoption, it's passe or something like out of vogue, and we should be using Tailwind and React components and things like that. It's like really kind of a problem with the web development industry, I believe, at large. Let's go ahead and copy this and we'll edit this. I just noticed a couple of people hopped on the stream and then hopped right off. I'm supposing that they heard me say Bootstrap. Okay, and here's another example of this. So of these headings. So this, the GitHub issue should be a heading level 1 because it's the page title. If we look at even the GitHub markup, if they're even using headings, it's not clear that they're using headings. So they're not really using semantic markup here as well. It's oh, there it is, heading 1. Okay, there it is. So yeah, it's heading 1, but the large language model is sort of conditioned to use heading 2 as the first level of a issue description. So its headings are actually improving, but they're a little bit off as well in this case. In this context, these should be heading level 2. All right, so we don't need the description. We don't need to say issue description for the description. Let's just put that there. This is implicit. I'll leave it there. The large language model should be able to notice the ingredients. So our project build with Django and Wagtail CMS includes a search page that retrieves results from various content types. These content types are defined as database models, each with a corresponding search template for displaying results. However, there are inconsistencies in formatting and labeling across the templates. For example, some templates display the content in parentheses, and we need to standardize these templates specifically. So this is an experiment so I can see how useful the GitHub Copilot Workspace is. I'm going to remove the files to edit. And it's using Bootstrap 4, so that might be problematic. And let's use the magazine article search template as reference. Let's link to that. So that's under magazine, templates. And I think it's just under summary. I think this is the one here. So magazine templates, magazine article summary. And if Copilot can't do this, this is something I can definitely do. But I'm trying to get in the habit of experimenting with these tools and seeing how they can fit into our workflow and augment that and potentially accelerate our workflow. So it's good to know how they work and what their limitations are. And I'm not sure if I have this consistent interface, the teaser, that could be a good interface, but let's go ahead and update the comment. Now let's open this in Workspace. So what this is going to do is take the issue, it's going to analyze the text that we just put into the prompt, it's going to generate a specification. It's going to find the search result templates that follow standardized magazine article template found in user's desired format. Other search result templates, search templates, event, search templates. Yeah. Do not follow this format. Okay, so actually that's correct. So if I go back here to search templates, magazine article, cool. This is correct. Yeah, this is a relatively challenging issue for somebody new to the project. Luckily, and so this LLM might also struggle with that. Luckily, all the templates are consolidated here. So it's search templates, search magazine article, HTML. Whoops. We'll edit this one. Can't edit. That's interesting. Can you just? Oh yeah. Whoa, cool. Interesting. Magazine article. So I had the description wrong. It did follow what I said in the description. This is an example. You've got to be very careful. It's using emojis, inconsistency in formatting. So it's getting caught in a loop, it looks like. Okay, maybe it's done. So essentially it sees that the current state is not all the search templates follow the standardized bootstrap card body format with consistent labeling. The reference one search template search magazine article follows the desired layout, and community directory, online worship, organization, magazine issue uses a card structure but lacks a brief teaser. So community directory, online worship, organization, magazine article, match that. Magazine issue, we can remove this, it's not relevant. And news item and event templates. Okay, so let's do this. Put this to the side here. Shoot. Well, that was interesting. Let's see if I can parse my regex. Hitting Shift Enter to put a new line, but you can't put line breaks inside of the prompt modification. So this, I guess you could think of this as a discovery session. Like if I were working with an engineer on this task, we commonly have a discovery session to look at the technical feasibility and specific steps to implement the feature. Then we create a little bit of a plan. Ideally, you'll have a little bit of a plan going into an issue. Sometimes we just roll up our sleeves and code. We get in the habit and we're familiar with the code base. But it's not picking up on what I'm saying. So and this was, in fairness, this was part of the original prompt I got back from GPT. It was sort of listing which templates, and it's an important detail. I was hoping that Copilot would work that out, but okay, it didn't. So for this, I can't put a new line. So again, maybe I haven't made this explicit, but so maybe it's not saying it again, but we want to balance the familiarization of the tool with just getting the work done. And maybe sometimes it's more of a hassle to use a tool. It's like automation. How much effort does it take to do something? And what's the threshold at which you would try to automate that? Okay, so now it's it's kind of picking up on it. Maybe I missed this, but yes, all search result templates now follow the standardized Bootstrap card body formatting with consistent labeling. The fallback display and search template search for the search. Oh yeah. All right, let's just go for it. Semantic H2 elements with Bootstrap classes used in all search templates visually. The title in each search template is now wrapped in a card titling, and a brief teaser text is displayed when available. Okay, so it's going to have to inspect the model. For that, let's say generate plan. Let's go for it. Let's see what it's going to do. So it's going to read the file cache. So it's vectorized apparently our code base. So now it's looking in all of our search template. Update the title to use an H2 element with Bootstrap class for smaller heading appearance. Ensure that the title is wrapped in a card title link. Remove content type in parentheses. So notice that community directory there. Maybe. Yes. So only in the event. So community directory. Doesn't really have that, but okay. All right. So that's the plan. So we've got the community directory, event, magazine article, magazine issue, meeting, online worship, organization, and search fallback. So yeah, let's see what it does, what kind of changes it makes to delta or the diff. So in this case, the change was something I could have gone in and done fairly quickly, probably 10 minutes. And I've spent, well, 20 minutes, let's say, prompting. So I've already exceeded the amount of time it would have done taking me to do this manually. I'll just be upfront about that. But part of this is also, again, a learning thing, learning how to use these tools, because I believe it's going to become increasingly common for us to use these assistive tools in our workflow. I'm not of the belief that this can be fully automated, at least not with my direct experience using these tools. As we can see here, it needs a lot of guidance and sort of hand-holding, and you still need not only knowledge of the craft, but knowledge of the project, I think, is essential to guide the tool. So they do seem like it's something that integrates into our workflow and can accelerate us and help with repetitious tasks or communication, defining things. So I want to learn how to use this and see how it can slot into my workflow. I think that they're going to become much more prevalent. But so far the changes are looking good. So it is using semantic. So it's using semantic markup, and even my own code wasn't fully semantic here. If what we see on the page, we have a header level 1, and the next heading level should be header level 2. But I even made the mistake of not using headers, which might be okay actually to not use a header. But in some cases, I'm using header 2, and in some cases I was using header 3. Here's the header. At least in the code, I'm using header 3. But if we go to a news, let's check the news template. Yeah, the news item template's not included in this. And then we can check Yes, so this will take a slight refactoring. It'll increase the scope of the refactoring. So this has put me much more in the reviewer perspective. I'm essentially a peer reviewer actively steering this code, but I'm not actually writing the code. And again, I don't know, how this would compare with me writing the code time-wise, but I can imagine. Yeah, I just don't know. I can't really imagine. I don't have a lot of context for how like a much more complicated task would be to perform using the Copilot to write the code and me to steer it. So it's still mainly looking in the search templates. Let's go ahead and open this. Pull request, I think. And if I look within the code, which we can do here in VS Code actually locally, specifically with contact events, magazine, search templates. They're all namespaced there. So maybe this will be sufficient. All right, so let's go ahead and open up the pull request. Now what's the difference between update selected files and open a pull request? Pull request would be the normal flow where it would let me review the changes. I can pull it locally. So I think that's what I should have done, but this is interesting that you can just update it directly. Oh, I see. It's as part of the plan, I suppose. That's the step where it generates the diff. Okay, and then I'll open the pull request once it's done this. Interesting. So there's another task that's more complicated and probably more boilerplate, and I think these are going to excel mostly with these probably boilerplate tasks, writing unit tests, improving test coverage, and I have a task that I want to create mock data for all the content, so I can scaffold the website in the development environment and then essentially have fixtures for all the content. How we define the fixtures could be just JSON, fixtures JSON, or we also have Faker installed. We can generate fake content as well, because I need to test these kind of features. We're gonna have to test this out locally. I can't just merge this as is, although actually I probably could merge this. It looks pretty straightforward. Although that's the strange thing is I don't see in the template. Where's defining the entity type? This could be just coming from the default. If it doesn't have a search template, caught something in my search views. So that's where it is. So it's in the fallback one. We had the content type name. It's simple as that. So the whole the whole pull request kind of revolved around this line, but it's also the formatting. So actually, this is good. I think I could go ahead and open a pull request and kind of merge this. So create pull request, boink, and it writes out the pull request description. This is pretty cool. I kind of like this experience. Again, I'll acknowledge that it did take a lot of tacit knowledge and understanding of the project structure, the goals of the organization, and the craft of coding, you know, how Django templates in HTML works and things like that to clearly define the task and to steer the outcome. 1066 Norman invasion. Very interesting, and it even links to the Copilot Workspace session. So let's read this carefully. I want to always get in the habit of, you know, peer reviewing not only human-generated artifacts, but especially these machine-generated ones, right? It's the same practice. So updates the search result templates to follow a standardized format across the site. Standardizes the HTML structure of the search result templates to use a bootstrap card body format, ensuring a consistent appearance and layout. This includes updating titles to use an H2 element with bootstrap classes for smaller heading appearance and wrapping titles in a card link. Removes the content type in parentheses next to the title across all search templates, aligning with the desired outcome for a cleaner and more uniform display of search results. Adjusts the fallback display for search results without a specific template and to also use the bootstrap card body format, and removes the content type in parentheses next to the title. Maintains the functionality in search feature in the search views, ensuring that the search results are correctly rendered using the updated templates without altering the core search functionality. Okay, so yeah, that was changed the comment. We'll go with it though. It did maintain the functionality. It was just whether or not to use backticks in a comment is interesting. All right, so we have our pull request open. Sorcery. Now I have a few other AI helpers here, scanning the code for various things like security analysis, my test coverage, code quality, and like lint level things, as well as code smells. And this is primarily relegated to templates. These are all template changes, but it'll be interesting to see the results. Now I mentioned that this would be good for sort of boilerplate tasks and helping just get through kind of things that are not as enjoyable. And one of the big boilerplate tasks we have is to improve our test coverage. Right now we have a pretty high test coverage, 90%, 7%, because we're only analyzing the coverage for our Python code basically. But in Django, it's rendering content on the server, and there is a bit of logic, very so slightly in our project, in the templates, just like in a React project, for example. You have a lot of business logic that resides in the view layer. And in Django, the view has a different meaning. It's typically the view assembles, it's written in Python, it assembles data from the database and renders that into a template. It's similar though in a React or JavaScript where you're getting data in the context and you're rendering HTML. So it's the same in principle. It's just different where that rendering is occurring on the server versus the client. And now React is moving more also to a server rendered context, which is cool. There's trade-offs. Nothing is ideal, and I don't think it suits us to say there's only one way. That's not the case. In any case, most of our view code even is defined in Python, but there is in the Django templates, there's a little bit of markup like conditional statements, loops, things like that. And we're not necessarily testing any of that. So and our test coverage analyzer is only looking in Python. So this 97% test coverage is actually a false positive, I would say, or something like that, if that's not the correct usage of that phrase. It's more likely to be something around 80, 70, or less. The bulk of our project code is written in Python. So there is 7% HTML, so maybe it's not so far off to say that we're close to 90%. So maybe 80 or 90 is a good estimate. But this is really nice that from my perspective, in this project in particular, most of the logic living in Python is the right architecture. It's the right level of maintainability and having a little bit of HTML. And we have some small amounts of other code, like some scripts in JavaScript is present as well. We just haven't needed to enhance many of the displays with dynamic behavior. So we've taken a very strategic and conservative approach to the architecture of this project, and we didn't opt for like a single page application architecture where it just didn't seem like a good fit. That's not to say that SPA architecture is good or bad, or there's not one way. You have to kind of look at each project and find the right way forward based on the context. All right, so we've got a pull request open. Sorcery is also adding a summary. So this AI tool is giving me a guide on how to review the code generated by Copilot, which is kind of interesting. So the pull request standardizes a search result templates across the site by updating the HTML structure to use a bootstrap card body format, ensuring consistent appearance and layout. It also removes the content type in parentheses. Yeah, so it's kind of describing what was already here, but okay. And we do have, let's see what this links to. So it shows the Copilot specification and everything there. So that's kind of cool artifact that people can view. And this sorcery is also free for open source. It does give you some feedback on potential changes. redundant paragraph tag. The paragraph tag wrapping the times of worship field might be redundant if the field already contains paragraph tags. Which it doesn't. I'm not sure. So this, I'm on the fence about this. So it's saying ensure that the heading levels are consistent across all templates for better accessibility and SEO. This is the interesting thing. The distinction between semantic and aesthetic markup. So we're using a semantic tag here, H2, but we're wanting to change the visual display. We don't want to use H2 like to have, in this case, very large text. So Bootstrap gives us the ability to separate those concerns. And, CSS in general, you can have a different style for your headers. That's just the way it works. And now Sorcery is saying, well, your style should match the semantic unit, and that's not the goal of this pull request. So in a way, the Sorcery here is missing the point that we're separating the style from the semantics, and we're using correct semantics and the desired style. And these two things are distinct. And that's kind of what causes, in a way, I would say, confusion in the developer community of using the wrong heading levels. And because we're focused on the visual outcome, naturally, we're thinking from the end user perspective. But in a lot of our users, and in general, semantics, a lot of our users aren't necessarily, some subset of them aren't going to be reading this visually. Some of them are using screen readers and things like that. So having this semantic structure is important as well. And search engines, for example, as it mentions SEO here, are scanning our content, and the semantics matter at the search engine optimization level as well. Higher level headings will rank that content higher in the search engine model typically. I don't know, I'm not an expert in SEO, and they're black box algorithms in any case, but the reason these semantic values exist is because this thing I'm marking up, this header, it takes more prominence in the information hierarchy. So it's natural to emphasize a header versus a paragraph. So these are I'm going to downvote these so I can help train their model. And I just realized header 5, header 5, header 4. Even this one should be header 5. Or they should all be header 4s, one or the other. Let me just think about that. Header 5, header 4. So I didn't notice that. That wasn't part of the specification, but this isn't necessarily a mistake a human would probably make. Because I think as even a junior, or like somebody new to a project, I would kind of understand that I'm seeking consistency here, so I should be using consistent header styles. Although, yeah, various skill levels of engineers and developers, especially in large and complicated projects, we introduce all sorts of inconsistencies. So it's not a blanket statement I'm trying to make, but in the context of a single pull request that's affecting 20 lines of code across several files, I think a human it's not hard for us to keep in context in our mind that all of these changes, these few lines, should be consistent. In much more large scale projects that are evolving organically, and we're working across many weeks and months or even years introducing features, these inconsistencies just happen, but not in this scale. So of a single pull request. So let's decide if we want header 4 or header 5. I'll just resolve all of these. So in a way, the tool is useful, but also noisy. And I'll just be honest, this change I could have made in probably 15 minutes, and we're into almost an hour. And into the session, but it's a learning experience. So what we're going to do is we're going to use it's just made every other one. We'll go with header level 5 for them all. So again, you really need a human in the loop in these processes. I think this is really important. And a lot of AI products I see being developed in projects and YouTube videos, they're focusing really heavily on automation, on autonomous agents that'll sort of take a task, like a single sentence description of a task, and maybe just automate that whole thing, the sort of magic one. I'm not sure how effective that strategy is going to be in the long run, but I see a lot of potential in the augmentative AI, where it kind of integrates into your workflow and you steer it and you review the output of each step and you make corrections and modifications, and it does some of the tedious work for you. So H5, 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 H5. Yeah, so we'll add these to batch. We'll commit those. Yeah, because even with just this amount of context, several changes across multiple files, but only 24 lines of code, we can see the AI losing the thread. And honestly, even as a reviewer looking at this much lines of code, it's kind of tricky. So I'm prone to overlook something here. But let's go ahead and pull this down. So if I go to GitHub here, pull requests. Run the server. Need to run the database. Woo, this is a problem in my local development environment. Doesn't have any database setup or anything like that. I think because of the scope of these changes is so small and direct here. And actually, this change shouldn't be. Interesting what to do here. Well, we need to list the label. Oops. This times of worship is a free text. All right, so we'll have to test this locally. So this one I want as a management command. That'll give me the initial Python setup. This gives us the empty site. But then I have to create a super user, which is naturally its own command. Okay, so naturally our site won't have any content. And this is no longer relevant. To change that as well. These are details that, so this is getting to the point, like a model can't really pick up on these holistic things. It needs guidance, and the fact that this is written in quotes with the person in parentheses is related to this task, but it's not something that LLM will implicitly know about. A human's gonna have to know this. So yeah, this is again another example of how I don't think these LLMs can really be used to automate these tasks. You have basically, you need a human in the loop that has not only knowledge of the craft, but knowledge of the project, and can run in and inspect the output. I don't, even as advanced as they get, I think the context is very difficult to provide to the LLM. Just the prompt, providing as much context as already took up about half of this session, just prompting it to get a good outcome. And that's not so, completely different than, working with people, and even junior developers or people of all just in general, you need to give context, you need to give information. And it's easy to overlook a detail like that, even as a person, you know, an engineer working on a task as well. So it's not necessarily only a problem of LLMs. I think what we try to assume that LLMs should have somehow better performance than humans on task, but we forget that we're error prone as well, and we just have different types of errors perhaps. But you know, we hallucinate, we you know, to use a phrase, we bullshit, we lie, we mislead. And so the things that we're criticizing LLMs for, we also need to remember that humans do these, or humans are susceptible to bias and, you know, misinformation and disinformation and things like that, and making mistakes and overlooking details and stuff. It's the same. So let's go ahead and what we're going to do is create some content. And specifically, it's a bit of a challenge. All right. So yeah, the template looks good, and I'm pretty confident it'll look good for the rest of them. Got the structure and the semantics. So let's go with that. The other aspect was it's making a change here, and I want to take a look at this. So if we create a online workshop, we don't have a lot of these, but they can appear. They can appear also. So those are our where did I put that? Interesting. Online workshop. Reorganized the site, and I've completely forgotten where I put things. Times of worship. Now this is interesting. It's okay. So it's a, yeah, this is a rich text field. It's just letting us do whatever we want here. Which is why it shouldn't be wrapped in a paragraph. Yes. So that's easy enough to just revert. I can understand the justification. It's like this floating, it's just this floating thing. Maybe we'll wrap it in a div so it does have something to link them. It's not an ideal thing, but it's a rich text field that gets wrapped when I publish this, and I view it in this search results. And we'll fix that, interestingly. So it is already wrapping it in a paragraph. That's why I think we didn't need to wrap it in our own paragraph. We'll fix the description. And Interestingly, it's Times of Worship is in its own paragraph, and this is in its own paragraph, but not in the template. So maybe the browser is automatically correcting that. I think this is actually a header 3. Or I don't have clear design guidelines here to follow what we want to display in a tag. It might be that we don't want to display the times of worship. That's here. We could leave it at that. Let's do that. Let's take it out. Remove those altogether. Search results should be succinct. Now, what's going on with the description? Okay, so what it did is it took off the rich text formatter. So this is introducing a bug also. And this is also a mistake a person wouldn't make, probably. I mean, there's no real clear reason to remove the rich text. This is just the LLM, kind of a hallucination. It sort of was fixing text by adding a semantic markup that doesn't need to be added, because if we look at the description, it's already going to wrap it in a paragraph. So interestingly, we'll just revert that change. But I can see why it wants to add the card text, because that's the bootstrap markup. So in a way, I did prompt it to do this. I told it to use bootstrap markup. So actually I need to take out that whole block. So let's just go ahead and do this. And for this, you can't make the change. So we'll pull these down. Hey, Sebastian, how you doing? Super early bird, yeah. My sleep cycle's all over the place. And while we're here, we're gonna make a change to the search templates online worship. And it's just to remove this conditional thing here. So yeah, just experimenting with this GitHub Copilot, what do they call it? This thing. Copilot Workspace, and basically seeing how far I can get Copilot to write code for me. It did a pretty good job, but overall I think you know, it would have been much faster if I would have just written the code here, and even then I'm having to get in and write the code. So it's like, I'm not sure exactly saving me some time here, but mainly this is seeing how it works and kind of things like that. Familiarization, you know, I might not be using it the most effectively. I'm giving it the wrong prompt in a way, but I couldn't anticipate in my prompt everything that, you know, the details. Usually when we write a ticket on like GitHub or whatever, we're in a project management mode, and that's project manager's task, you know, or team lead or whatever, isn't to specify how to do things, but more what to do. And then the coder will figure out the how, and you just have to give the what and the why typically. and the coder will understand based on the why, what's the outcome here. We want consistent heading semantics and consistent heading visuals, and the person needs to figure out what kind of changes to make. But in a way, this Copilot approach, I'm needing to specify the what, the why, and a bit of the how, and then getting into actually doing it. So it's like kind of you having to wear all hats. And in any case, as a single developer, I'm used to doing that. But I'm trying to figure out how this fits into the workflow. It seems like it's pretty good at creating specification, and it got me 80% of the way there though, so that's pretty good. So this is a preview feature, Copilot Workspace. It's kind of cool though. We just gave it this issue description, and I used GPT to help me get this prompt in good shape. I might have been too specific, and it didn't exactly even follow the prompt. But that's okay. What are you up to? How have you been? Then it creates a specification here of the changes, and then the specific plan, and implements the plan. So now if we go to our local test, we should be in better shape here. I need to run this server. Make sure I got everything here. Good push. Forgot where I was. Now I'll run the server. So news test, online worship test. It seems to be working. I think we can kind of merge this. It does sound cool, but I wonder, it doesn't slow you down. Yeah, that's right. That's a really good point. I think this task, let's say 1 hour. I've been working on it for 1 hour. And the changes, with knowledge of the project, how it's organized and everything else, the scope of this pull request is, changing 20 lines of code across, 9 files or whatever. Although this is a superfluous change. Doesn't matter if I use backticks or quotes in a comment, but anyway, the bot picks up on this superfluous details as well. But the rest of them are pretty much what was asked for. So in a way, in this exact case, it slowed me down if I would have just implemented this task. But we've got to keep in mind, we're thinking of like success criteria, and one level of success is to finish the task. Is the task done? I've succeeded. But also, I think learning and growing, skills, growing professionally is a success criteria. And in this session, I also had the, goal of learning more about Copilot Workspace and improving my prompting skills and task definition and things like that. So those were secondary goals that took up the primary amount of time. It took the bulk of the time writing the right prompt and steering the Copilot Workspace. I suppose, the Copilot Workspace will improve, and I'll get better at using it as well. So I want to start practicing with it. This was my first time using it. Yeah. But it's a really key observation you're making is like, how much do these tools help and how much are they a hindrance, and leaning on them. And I can't just lean on it to totally implement the task. I had to really get in there. All right, but I think we can kind of merge this. I think we're good to go. Merge and deploy. But in a previous session, or just locally working not on stream, I'm also starting a greenfield project and just seeing how far I can go, having the Copilot Workspace just write all the code, acting more as the engineer, the Copilot Workspace acting as like the engineer, and myself just acting as like a product manager. And we'll continue those experiments. So here's the before, and sort of here's the after. We're looking good. We're consistent, and I think the pull request is as good as it'll get. And if I notice any little things, I will fix those later. So squash merge and wait for deploy. Are you working on any projects lately, or what do you got in the works? Let's check our So it's interesting, issued 1066, the Norman invasion, when English language sort of became a mixture of French and English due to conquest. And I think this is an interesting analogy that the large language models in a way are now invading our workflows, and our workflow will become a mixture of large language model. It'll be infused with LLM output and input. It's going to be a hybrid thing, I think, going forward. So that's why I'm interested in learning these tools, is to see how the work is going to change, how we'll need to adapt to it. I don't think they're going to go away, and I don't think they're necessarily silver bullet. It's pretty clear they have limitations, and I just want to understand more the capabilities and limitations and how it's going to affect my work and career, and how it can help me amplify ideas, things like that. AWS, no projects, playing with web clippers, offline knowledge base. Okay, very cool. Hey, you might be interested in, and you might have already experimented with large language models for chatting with your knowledge base. Have you done anything with that? It's like a jargon catchphrase, but the retrieval augmented generation. Now that we have a moment, I can show you a project that I'm working with locally and how it might be useful in your knowledge base, where you can have a conversation with your knowledge base. Let's see, this was merged. It should deploy soon, so let's take a quick look. Not yet. There's my alarm. Hey, time to wake up. Nice. I just had a light night of sleep. Yeah, Chat PDF is an example. Yeah, implementation. And I can show you much more specifically how it goes beyond just PDFs, of course. And there's products being developed around retrieval augmented generation too, so it's not like something secret. But I've been working with this directly. Ah, there we go. There's our changes. So looking good. Everybody's consistent. I like it. Much more clean. Ah, okay, that letter in parentheses was actually part of the title. I like it though. Very good. Okay, so issue done. Let's have some fun. I mean, that wasn't so bad. It was a learning journey. It took 1 hour. Let's just call it 1 hour to do a 10-minute task. Woo! Supercharged. No, it would have taken me, honestly, a little bit more to do the task, probably rolling up my sleeves and things. 20 minutes, let's call it. All right, yeah, so have you heard of Langflow? Or there's other ones, but FlowRise, oops, that's a bug on Langflow I've been talking about, and now they've resolved it. Langflow, it's got a 1.0 release milestone recently. I don't, that doesn't mean a lot. Yeah, so check this out, and I'll show you how it works real quick, and I'll show you a project. So I come on this sort of Quaker groove right now, working on the Western Friend website, and I'm building a little bit of a project, a demonstration for Western Friend to show we're in discernment about these kind of tools. We're trying to understand how they work and what some of the implications are, ethically, legally, and pragmatically, and what are how to use them, when not to use them, how to use them safely, all this kind of stuff. So we're talking about a lot of little topics here, like constitutional AI, what types of models there are, what it means to have principle-based technology, and in the process of discernment, I'm also showing some potential applications. So this Langflow is like a visual programming environment built in Python. There's another one called FlowRise that's built in JavaScript, and there may be some other ones emerging that lets you build large language model applications, including knowledge base chats, like chat PDF type stuff. But it's not just PDF, it's actually much more powerful than that. So I'll take a quick break real quick. I just need to switch mindset, and I'll get this project running locally, and we can take a look at how I built a chat based on a really large series of letters that were written in the 1600s, and I want to chat with these letters by a guy named George Fox. So I'll be right back, and we can check this out. And I think this might get you thinking about how you can use it with your knowledge base or at work or other ways. A lot of cool applications for this. So I'll see you in just a minute. All right, let's take a look at LangFlow. And again, there are other examples of these tools. There's some commercial products coming out. There's another open source one called Flowise, and it's worth comparing these because there's pros and cons. Flowise is a really interesting one as well. And they let you, they're pretty flexible. They let you build tools with all sorts of components, different language models, different knowledge sources, integrations. Flowise, in terms of integrations, I believe, has a bit more than LangFlow. Then it basically gives you an API you can integrate into another app and, you know, deploy and put, you know, in your applications, giving, you know, assistance on your website, generating content using it as part of a team, writing code, you know. So Flowise, I think, has a bit more traction and visibility in the YouTube community, especially. It's just it's a Y Combinator project, maybe, seems, and it's written in Node and TypeScript, so it's not like my necessarily where I'm coming from. So I kind of gravitated towards this Langflow, which is written in Python primarily, which is my background, but some JavaScript. So you need a JavaScript client to make the rich interactive UI. Make.com, a great example. Make.com, I think the key difference is my understanding of Make.com, it's more like if this then that. It's sort of like an automation and workflow and integration tool. Whereas these are you construct applications around large language models. So these are just tailored. The user interface is similar to Make.com in terms of graph-based or flow-based programming, which I think this is a great example use case. These Make.com and ChatGPT type of thing, where you don't need a lot of imperative logic. It's more about orchestration and that kind of level of abstraction. That's where flow-based programming and visual programming, I think, excels. Whereas I've seen visual programming languages that are trying to do imperative logic in a graph-based approach, and that just is not, I think, the right paradigm. But things like compositing, these Blender graph-based nodes for generating textures or geometries. I think those are the right level, and I think other applications like DaVinci Resolve has some compositing flow. These are kind of where graph-based programming excels, where it's a natural paradigm. So let's go ahead and let me get this Langflow project running locally and show you how it works. It's just Python, more or less. Python projects, you would just install it with pip install in a virtual environment. They have some deployment options, and this is where your AWS knowledge might be helpful right away. But they have some one-click deployment options for these. The project just came out of 1.0 alpha, and their emphasis during that time was getting a stable 1.0 release. So the documentation and sometimes the deployment scripts aren't quite there yet. I went through this Google Shell tutorial, and it didn't work at the end of the tutorial. But these one-click ones deployed a render, or a Railway I actually used, I think. I get these two confused, but I deployed the Railway today, and that just worked, one-click deployment. But they also have instructions for Kubernetes on their documentation website, as well as on GitHub. And the GitHub example seems to be a bit more comprehensive. So I think their documentation is in progress. So, but the question, does it require GPU on the host? It depends. So let's get it running, because it depends where your model is running. And for my workflows that I've been building, I'm using commercial off-the-shelf models. I'm specifically using OpenAI. I would like to use the Anthropic model. I think Anthropic Claude has made really big changes, improvements lately. And I like the fact that it's a constitutional model. So let's run it. But in those cases, my system requirements are very low, because if essentially we're just making API calls. Put this in dark mode so it's easier on the eyes. Yeah, cool. What are your thoughts on Claude? What do you think of that? And the new artifacts and some of the features they released recently. So I'll break this down a little bit so you can see the main components that are involved here in the flow. But I'll just give you an example. Yeah, artifacts is really cool. I think it's in a way, it's a killer feature. It's Claude's killer feature. I know GPT can do markdown and things integrated in the chat, but when I try to get that output into a document like Notion or something, I have to do a lot of copy paste, deleting these lines around it, like the preamble and summary, and I just want the artifact. And so artifact is a key, I believe, aspect of the large language model workflow. The artifact is what you're working on, right? And that's a great concept to introduce to the product and like the design mentality. All right, yeah, it's great at generating simple SVGs and documents and things like that. So the artifact is really important, and that's an example of what we saw here with this pull request. You know, essentially this session, this Colab Workspace session, was me prompting the large language model through a structured process. So we call this a workflow, where I define an issue, we create a specification, or it generates the specification, and then a change plan to work on some artifacts, right? So these are like meta level concepts, workflow and artifacts, that are coming into more and more of these large language model powered applications, because it's always inherently about the large language model, right? It's about the application and the workflow. What am I working on? I'm working on code. I want some assistance from the large language model. How do we build these applications is an interesting question. And how do they help or hinder our work is what we're exploring a bit more pragmatically. So here's a way of building large language model applications. So in addition to artifacts, you know, if you think of just human work, we have workflows or processes that we follow to create artifacts, and we use tools in the process. My IDE is a tool, or a hammer, or a chisel, or a whisk. You know, these are tools that we use to make the output of our work. And large language models are also following this paradigm. Now Claude has artifacts, and we can introduce tools and toolkits to the models. So these are higher level abstractions or primitives, and they call them components in this. But a component, they're categorized, and I think these are just React components, by the way. But it's components that has a different meaning in that context, right? It's like it's a thing you put into it's a component of a software. It's like that you use to compose a larger application. So we're going to get you can get chat from the user, or you can pull in text. This is just freeform text. And at the end of the chain, you usually will put a response to the user, or use some text output. And these don't have to just be terminal. They can be part of the flow. There's usually inputs and outputs. Some of them, like the chat output, you know, well, it has a message output that can be passed on to another part of the flow. You can make templated prompts. So you have a prompt, and you can insert data into that template from different sources to graph. You can make API requests. You can load files and URLs or directories of files, and even get like webhook data to power the graph. You can think of whatever use cases you might have for that. It integrates with a lot of different models, including Anthropic. So I'm going to start working with Anthropic soon. Anything that can be deployed on Hugging Face. So this is where you might need a GPU. You can run local models, like Ollama can run locally. I'm not sure about these other ones. Or you can use GPU instances on Amazon Bedrock or Hugging Face, or just use a commercial off-the-shelf, Anthropic, Azure, Grok, Cohere. Is that a French? Mistral? One of these is a French company. Yes, you have choice. You have choice of models, which means you can swap in models. You can swap them in and out. And even within the OpenAI model, I can swap out models, models in models. Then it's got some helpers that are useful at various stages, and we'll go through this particular flow. And this is very specific for if you have your own database, like a local knowledge store. What was it called again? Knowledge base. You can make that information accessible to the model without having to like copy and paste or put the whole knowledge base in every prompt. You can retrieve specific results out of there using search and insert the search results into your prompt to feed the model and get a better result. And that uses embeddings for vectorizing the semantics into like a semantic space and then retrieving them. So the embeddings go both for the input and output. And I haven't gone much deeper, but there's quite a lot of things you can do, reading from various types of data sources, chaining, so the conversation chains, and you want your chat to remember your name or remember what you talked about. So there's different places you can store the memory, locally or otherwise. Sometimes you want to give a tool to search the web or read data or Wikipedia. I haven't learned how to use these yet. Wikipedia article. And then there's some like getting in more imperative zone. They're even going to have conditional chains and tools. You can just run Python. It's all Python, so you can basically do anything you can do in Python. It's really powerful. Yeah, so I'll just show you basically what I learned about vector DBs. It's actually fairly simple, so to speak. It's, once you've learned it, then it's easy to do again. And the tool makes it very easy to do. So it's like drag and drop easy, but simple isn't always easy. Like in the learning curve, it took me a few tries, so there's that. All right, so here's how we do it. I've got this text, and this can be markdown text or anything. I just pulled this text, the Epistles of George Fox, and these are written in like the 1600s mostly. And I was just curious to learn this because this George Fox was a founding member of the Quaker faith and practice. And so it's like OG Quaker. And so, I'm working on some Quaker stuff, and we're in discernment about how these tools can serve like the alignment question. And we want to find a middle ground between the accelerationists who are just saying, go all in on it. It's just, if we don't do it, somebody else will do it. This is the future. This is going to transform everything. To the other end of the spectrum, what we would kind of call, there's the Luddites. You might have heard of them. They were anti-technology, anti-industrialization activists, and went so far as like destroying factories. I don't know the exact history of it, but we use that term now to be somebody who's not familiar with technology or hesitant about technology. We want to be somewhere in the middle and find a good path and help guide the emergence of these technologies so that they align with our interests and needs. Hence like looking again into Claude's constitutional AI. So you get some text. I got this text from George Fox, kind of giving you a bit of context about the project. And then what you need to do is you can't just throw that all into a vector database. We'll typically divide it up into chunks. And these are 1,000 character chunks, but you can configure it, and they should have a little bit of overlap. That way it can retrieve neighboring chunks. If there's like a search string that appears in between, you'll get a larger blob of text. And if you have structured data, it looks like you can specify where it should split the chunks, which will result in sometimes incomplete search results. So you can see a double new line as a delineator here, and we had a double new line here. So this becomes one chunk, and that as a search result isn't actually so useful. So it gets into your underlying data, how it's organized, the type of results you'll get. But if you got and so it might be natural for this whole thing to be a chunk in any case. And then when we look in our database in a minute, we'll see what those chunks look like. So all that's doing is just like literally just slicing up the text into chunks. And if I run this step, hey, thanks for the follow, Jesus. I appreciate it. We can see the output of that. I don't know if it's got a horizontal scroll. and each chunk has a file path or source. That becomes part of the metadata. Then what you need to do is feed those chunks into a vector database. Now I've already done this step, so I've actually disconnected this, because every time I run this graph, it does all the steps, and it's inserting the data into the database, and it's adding duplicate data, even though this feature is disabled. So I just had to disable it. But basically, your vectorization will be a separate flow typically, and separate process with separate orchestration than your usage, your daily usage. I just had to find these all in one graph for simplicity, but yeah, you'll have a different, like a cron job running this on a knowledge base that updates the vectors on a nightly basis or hourly basis, or even triggered on a webhook when a document is updated. You can just scan and parse and upsert that data, okay, into this database. Now there's a bunch of these vector stores. I recommend Astra or Upstash if you just want a really quick commercial off-the-shelf solution that's with affordable pricing. The usage from my toy project here with 300-page vector store is, you know, running in like pennies. It's very cheap. Yeah, you can run in GitHub Actions if you've got your knowledge base stored in Markdown and synchronizing in Git. It could trigger this vectorization flow on merge of a pull request that updates your documentation, for example. That's a great example. Yeah, so it's very powerful and flexible. You just think about your own use case and you build it with these primitives. So once we get it into the database, I believe I've already done this process here. Let me double check here. It just creates a SQLite. So I recommend these Astra and Upstash if you want a commercial off-the-shelf thing. Otherwise, this ChromaDB, which I've got here for testing purposes, is just running locally and very simple to use. I think it's like a Python project. It's a vector database. You define a collection. You tell it where to store it. And actually, since I don't have the DB file here, looks like, I hope I don't break my project here. I'm going to move, these are the previous databases. I'm going to actually run this, just this part of the flow. So it's going to split it and vectorize it. If I just hit play here, it runs, and runs this. And it takes a little bit. This is a fairly big document. And again, this could be iterating over files in a folder or triggered on the changed files in a GitHub pull request like you mentioned. That's a really good example. So now we have this DB folder, and it contains this SQLite database and some binary stuff. I don't know what these binary files are, but a pickle file, Python stuff. And what we can see is when we look inside this SQLite, I like this one because it's not so black box as the commercial off-the-shelf stuff. They have nice interfaces for browsing, exploring too, though. But you've got the default dimensionality of the vectors is 1536. This is a common standard. Just I want to highlight that there are other, and that comes from your embedding source. So I'm using the text embedding small from OpenAI. So their embedding dimensions are 1536. Their embedding space length 1536. I don't know. Anyways, it matters that if you use the wrong embedding size, especially on these commercial off-the-shelf ones, you might not be able to insert data into the database, or your retriever might not work correctly. So just be aware of that. So there's our collection, George Fox epistles. And here it is in the database. When we're going to search through it, we've got the full text here. And the vectors are, or the embeddings are here. And I don't know how it works beyond that, but this is cool that you can actually run the queries, and it's SQLite, so you can just move that around, commit it to GitHub, and all that kind of stuff that SQLite can do. Okay, so now we've got our items are vectorized. I'm going to delete this so I don't run that again, because I don't want to get duplicate data. But yeah, the whole vectorization graph is you take some input files, you split them up, and you apply it. You send those with a vector embeddings into a vector DB. Process phase A. Okay. And the next step is we're going to want to chat with that, right? So we're going to use this same Chroma DB, and I've got a chat input here that's actually just hooked up right here. And it's got the last thing I asked it. And that chat input comes here, and it's going to send the input into our Chroma DB retriever, which is also, I think, it might not need to use the embeddings at this point. I don't know if any API calls are going to be used for the embeddings because it's going to use it. Maybe it will, because it's going to embed, create an embedding for my input and search within the vector space, within the vector DB, and then retrieve the output and put that into a prompt. So yes, you still need your embeddings. That's there's local embedding options. I think those are here. So you'll just have to think about costs and some pragmatic choices. There may be something that runs locally. One of these Hugging Face ones or Olama embeddings might run locally, because you'll need those both input and output to search, to store and retrieve the search data. Okay, cool. And the search results then from my text will come to a parser. It's coming out in a format that can't be used directly. When you hover over these, it shows you what you can plug it into. And the output of the search results can't be used directly by the agent or the prompt. You have to parse it first. So we just pop it through there and we get text output. It's a little bit of an imperative step. But then what I did is I defined a prompt. And we create two variables in our prompt, one for the output of the epistles and one for the user's input. And the prompt looks like this. It's just literally what you would send to the agent. In our case, I'm building an application where I want to chat with these epistles. I want to kind of tell the agent how to behave. So you are a friendly helper who's focused on the epistles of George Fox. Answer the user input by using the epistles of George Fox. Help the user reflect on their life and concerns through the lens of Quaker values and teachings of George Fox with a contemporary ecumenical and interfaith perspective. When the conversation drifts too far away from the topic of Quakerism or subjects relevant to the teachings of George Fox, gently guide the discussion back to the topic. Speak in a casual and friendly voice using contemporary conversational English. You could tune the prompt, you can iterate on that. I can maybe make it more succinct. I'm repeating myself here. The tone, you want to kind of tell it how to speak. When I first built this flow, the output of the agent, it was writing me letters, because these epistles, I'm speculating why, these epistles were actually letters that were written between groups. They were public letters that were written in like the 1600s between groups of Quakers living in various parts of mostly Europe and the United States. I don't know really much of the history of early Quakers, but so they were written in the form of letters, and that's why I'm building this, so I can learn a bit about the history as well and what was going on. So they were saying, to these friends, to ministering friends, signed such and such. And when the output of the agent was actually writing me letters, it was like writing me epistles. So I just wanted it to be more conversational. So that was one thing I had to improve the prompt there. So here's a technique I've learned. These prompts are very good. These agents are good at parsing natural language, but also we need a way to delineate sections of the prompt to say, this is the input you're getting from the epistles. This is the input you're getting from the user. And I found, based on a Hacker News discussion, that XML is probably a really good format for that. Don't go to trying to put JSON or some other structure or YAML into our prompt. Just delineate the block with XML and you'll get pretty good results. So that's all I've done, is I've just created some XML tags or whatever. George Fox epistles in George Fox epistles. And then within here, this is the syntax that creates these outputs. You just put a curly brace and the variable name. And I just done that for the epistle. This is the coming out of the vector store, and the user input coming from the chat input. And when it notices those, it creates these inflows that you can then plug stuff into. So the result, if I run this now, get everything queued up, we can see here's the original prompt, here's the XML tag, but now that prompt variable has been infused, there's template interpolation going on that has put some results from our vector store into this output. And my input, which was from a previous session, what would George Fox dislike about OpenAI? So it's going to take my question and some results from our knowledge source and send that to ChatGPT. This is just the output of the prompt. This is a nice feature of it. Langflow, it lets you inspect the output at each step, so you can kind of helps you debug stuff. See, what are our search results? Okay, got these search results out of the ChromaDB, and it parsed them into text. Here's the parsed text. It's just a raw blob of text. Then it put that text into our template. It looks like that. So it's kind of nice developer experience. Then it sends that to ChatGPT as the input. I'm using ChatGPT 4.0, and I'm telling it not to hallucinate too much, to stick kind of close to the prompt input, not to invent too much of its own stuff. There's additional settings. Only a few of those are exposed in the graph UI, but you can get to the advanced settings here. You can actually just view the code and edit it. So that's cool too. So then we go to the chat. All right. And now we can see George Fox, the founder of Religious Society of Friends, was deeply concerned about the authenticity of the spiritual experience and direct, unmediated relationship with God. He often warned against anything that could distract or lead people away from this direct experience. From what we can gather in his epistles, Fox might be wary of OpenAI or any technology if it were used in a way that distracts people from their inner spiritual life or promotes confusion and disunity. Oh boy, those are happening on a pretty big scale, and not just with these generative AI, but like social media feeds, these algorithms, these artificial intelligences that are helping us promote misinformation and disinformation and discord and yeah, so it's interesting, which back to the point of why we need to approach these with an intentional process of discernment. Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and that's why this project's so cool to me, is because I can take these texts written in the 1600s and get contemporary insights, apply them to problems that are in my direct experience. Yeah, right. So this is it in a nutshell, and I'm working on deploying this, and I think we're going to have a little demonstration that we'll share with the Western Friend community, so we can try it out and see how the technology works, see the limitations of that, see some of the potential benefits and value it can bring. I mean, in my process of personal and professional development, I'm also interested in developing these sort of LLM apps and see where that leads. But this retrieval augmented generation is a very interesting tool, I believe, an architectural pattern where we can put our own knowledge and wisdom into the prompt and get results that are infused with that knowledge and wisdom on questions that couldn't have possibly been anticipated by the original authors. Yes, great point. Take Langflow for a spin, might integrate that with Obsidian. That's interesting. We should do, if you want to do a session on that, we can set that up sometime too, but I'll be interested to see your results. But that's exactly what I was thinking, because literally Obsidian and everything, because it's just markdown files, right? This is a very great idea. I think we're on the same wavelength here. Because if I go back to the data source, there's a directory data source, and all it takes is a path to the directory. So this could be just your Obsidian markdown files, and then you can specify or leave it empty. It'll just load everything. You know, these can be markdown. I don't know how you define it, but like that perhaps. Comma delimited. I'm not sure how this input works. So it can just parse all those markdown files up to a certain depth or infinite depth, load those in, and remember you'll get data out. You'll need to pass that to a recursive character text splitter. And that's under the experimental section, text splitters, just so for what it's worth. I'm going to publish this flow on GitHub. If you just start Langflow, since their 1.0 release, their examples might be a little bit out of date. So you just take your directory through a recursive character text splitter into a vector DB with your embeddings. That's the recipe for vectorization. So the file in my graph, the file would be replaced by a directory. That's the actual next step I'm going to take, because these epistles of George Fox come in multiple volumes. This is volume 2. So probably not going to do that today. But yeah, thanks for stopping by, Sebastian. Yeah, give me a message. I'll see you around. Actually, let's try this now. Volume 1 and the journal. Let's grab a bunch of files. So what I'll do, we'll change the structure here. Docs. And we will download a selection from the journal of George Fox. We'll check. I think these are all public domain. Yeah, public domain. And we can load these directly from a website as well. I could try them as markdown, but I'm going to put them in as text. Doctrinal Works, Volume 1. Doctrinal Works. Cool. Third volume, quite a lot. Prolific writer. Epistles of George Fox, Volume 1. I'd like to combine these writings with other, in this case, Quaker authors, but this can be used from any philosophical or historical source of documentation. So I'm also interested in like yogic teachings, or you could apply it to whatever you're interested in learning about. This is pretty intense title. I don't know what they mean by that. Crazy. That's like intense. What the heck? But that's that. That's what it is. The Journal of George Fox. Now we've got quite a lot of text from the public domain. So we're going to update our graph then. And I might just go ahead and delete this whole thing. So we'll rerun the vectorizer and have a fresh database. So yeah, the Friends library is a really excellent resource. You can get a lot of text from Project Gutenberg. And then what we're going to do is, rather than a single file, we're going to load this whole directory. Whoa, like that. And I'll just leave the text types blank. Docs should work. Recursive path should be relative. Relative path should work. And let's just see if it works up to this point. The recursive character text splitter is going to load them all. And we'll check the output in a minute. They're big files. But now we have 118 pages of text. So, and the metadata has the file path. And at this point, it might be possible to annotate them with additional metadata. Multi-threading, types, silent errors, recursive path, max concurrency, load hidden, and the depth. All right, maybe in my recursive character text splitter, there's metadata. Nope. Huh. If I want to cite the source they came from. Okay, anyway, let's go ahead and load these then into ChromaDB in our folder. We're going to run the process again. So load them all. Split them and pop them into our vector store using the embeddings. And out of curiosity, I'm going to check the costs I've been racking up. Platform.openai. I'll do it off stream, but today I've spent around 13 cents on GPT-4 Turbo, and my embedding usage from today is around, so far, 1 penny. So the costs I'm racking up in the whole month I've been experimenting with these fairly large texts, increasingly large. I've only spent around $3. So for the OpenAI API usage, you have to pay per use. The ChatGPT 4.0 model is fairly affordable. ChatGPT 4 is much more costly, and so I would recommend using, to start out, maybe 3.5 Turbo, but 4.0 is fast and affordable. All right, we're still vectorizing, so it's still putting the stuff into the database. But now, and it hasn't yet created the folder, and it may not. There may be something in this process that it moves the database elsewhere. I've had this problem before, but that's not a big deal. But when I've deleted the directory before, it somehow didn't put it back in the right place. And nice thing about the OpenAI API is you can set a limit. So I've set a low limit, and I'll get alerted if I exceed that limit, or it'll just stop working. But you can also get warned. Okay, error building component. Attempted to write a read-only database. Okay, so I think this is because I deleted it and somehow. Yeah, I've just had this bug before. So I'll just create a brand new folder. And it might be, the problem might be there's still some reference. When I deleted the thing here in VS Code, it could still somehow be in my trash or something. Yeah, it is there in the trash. So if I empty the bin, that might clear that up. I don't know. And it is sending telemetry by default. It's trying to, it's erroring on that. So it's interesting. Hopefully this one will work. Let's double check. So yeah, right away, if you don't get a folder right away, then something's wrong. So now it should create a SQLite. Vectorizing everything. We can maybe see if that's streaming in. So we'll have a collection. There it is, George Fox epistles. And no results yet. So it's just created the structure, and maybe it's working in memory right now. It's hard to see. It's a bit of a black box in terms of it's not logging exactly what it's doing. So it's a bit opaque, but you only have to do this vectorization process like to initialize the data or when it changes. And like Sebastian was mentioning, you know, we might have a GitHub action that runs the vectorization process on documents that changed as part of a pull request. That's a pretty cool one. So you're updating your Obsidian notebook knowledge base on GitHub, and you want to vectorize the files that changed so you can chat with them. Pretty cool use case. Now, most of these texts were written in the 1600s, so we're not really going to probably have too many changes to them. But that's the point of this exercise, is to start thinking of how to use these tools and how they can serve our workflows. So I am passing in a lot of data. It took a while, but there we go. Now if I go to the, maybe I have to reload the database somehow. Got our collection, embedding full text search. So somehow, yeah, this plugin doesn't necessarily oh, you have to probably this one here, right there. Yeah, nice. So we got 11,000 rows, almost 12,000 rows. Quite a lot of text there. And after that, we will just disconnect this splitter so that part of the graph won't run again. But we will need to retrieve the text. So everything else is basically the same. We'll go to the playground. I'll clear the chat. And I'll just say hello. Just thinking about it. This is a very generic statement. How's it going? If there's anything on your mind, something you'd like to chat about, feel free to share. We can reflect on it together through the wisdom of George Fox and the values of Quakerism. So it knows its like purpose, its constitution, so to speak. And we've got some search results that came out when I just said hello. It found somehow that hello statement is also relating maybe to farewell or dear friends, like the introduction. So farewell here. So hello and farewell are semantically related in that vector space. So it's retrieving those results. It's parsing them to a big blob. Sign George Fox, two friends in Carolina, dear friends. Probably finding semantic relationships there between hello and farewell. greetings and signature, so to speak. And then it constructs the prompt. So yeah, it has its, so to speak, agent prompt, or it's not quite a system prompt. We've got our XML tag to delineate the epistle text that we retrieved and the user input. So everything is just basically the same. So let's see. What would George Fox think about constitutional AI, such as described by Anthropic? So this model, this is still ChatGPT 4.0. So it has access to all of the latent knowledge in the GPT 4.0 model. We're just passing in some additional context with our prompt. These search results from the retrieval, the vector database. We're passing that all in with our user prompt. So in a way, we're activating more parts of the model, of the GPT 4.0 model or the Anthropic model. Hey, that's an interesting question. While George Fox lived in a time far removed from our current technological advancements, we can still reflect on his teachings to consider how he might view something like constitutional AI. So clearly ChatGPT 4.0 has an idea of constitutional AI. Maybe it's been trained on the literature and the marketing materials from Anthropic, as well as published academic papers. George Fox emphasized the importance of the inner light and divine guidance. He believed that true wisdom and understanding came from direct relationship with the divine rather than from human-made systems or constructs. In one of his epistles, he wrote about turning people from the darkness of sin and man-made religion to the light of Jesus Christ that shines in the heart. If we apply this perspective to constitutional AI, Fox might be cautious about relying too heavily on artificial systems for guidance and decision-making. He would clearly encourage us to ensure that any technology we create or use aligns with the ethical principles and promotes the well-being of all people. He might also remind us to seek inner guidance and maintain our spiritual integrity rather than becoming overly dependent on external tools. Interesting. Overly dependent. So that's the balance we're trying to strike here. In contemporary, ecumenical, and interfaith contexts, we could consider how constitutional AI can be designed and used in ways that reflect the values such as compassion, justice, and respect for all individuals. This aligns with the Quaker testimony of equality and the belief in the inherent worth of every person. So, while George Fox might not have had a direct opinion of AI, his teachings encourage us to approach such advancements thoughtfully, ensuring they serve the greater good and reflect our deepest values. What are your thoughts on how we can balance technological progress with spiritual and ethical considerations? That I like, that it prompted me for a response. This is interesting. And I think this is one of the big, most powerful aspects of these tools, is not just that we prompt them, but they prompt us. They prompt our thinking, they prompt our discussions. They enrich our workflow and our output to a certain degree, which can be, as demonstrated earlier in this stream, can be also an encumbrance. But this is a really interesting point, because I was actually thinking about including this in the sort of the system prompt or the agent prompt, that it should ask open-ended questions in response to the user input, and it just did that inherently. So let's see, what are your thoughts on how we can balance technological progress with spiritual and ethical considerations? So I believe we can use the process of discussion and discernment to explore how these technologies fit within our community values, taking a cautious approach while remaining open to the continuing revelation of the role of technology in our lives. It's a thoughtful approach. George Fox's teachings emphasize the importance of living in the pure life and being guided by the Spirit. He often spoke about the need for discernment and staying true to the inner light that guides us. In one of his epistles, he said, "Let God's wisdom have the stay of your minds, and let it be the end of all of your words. Beware of that spirit that leads out of it into anything." As an aside, this is partially why also I want to have this chatbot to help me interpret this. These were written in the 1600s, and oftentimes the language is, even as a native English speaker, it's like a bit thick. It's kind of hard for me to get my mind around. When considering new technologies, it's essential to reflect on how they align with our values and whether they help us stay connected to that inner light. Fox also advised, "Look not out, but within. Let not another's liberty be your snare." Right? What does that mean? This suggests that while we can be open to new possibilities, we should be cautious not to let the external forces lead us away from our core principles. In the context of continuing revelation, it's about being open to new insights and understanding how they fit within the framework of our spiritual lives. As you mentioned, discussion and discernment are key. Engaging in thoughtful dialogue within the community can help ensure that any adoption of technology is in harmony with our values and enhances our spiritual journey rather than detracting from it. How do you see technology fitting into your personal spiritual practice? Are there specific concerns or hopes that you have about this role in your community? Man, this is good. This is on point and really causing, it's, helping me reflect and asking open-ended questions. I think this is a pretty well-designed prompt and overall ChatGPT or LLM-based chat application. So I'd better take a break. It's been a couple of hours here and made some progress on the Western Friend website and improved our retrieval augmented generation project to chat with historic Quaker texts. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you're doing well and have a great day.